May I play for food? The voice was soft, almost too soft to be heard. But in the grand lobby of the Continental Hotel, those 5 words cut sharper than glass. Conversations froze. Champagne glasses stopped mid-air. The string quartet in the corner faltered and went silent. At the entrance of the ballroom stood a 12-year-old girl. She was small, thin, and dressed in clothes that hung loosely on her frame. Her sneakers were worn. A faded backpack was clutched tightly against her chest, as though it was the only thing she owned in the world. Her name was Amelia Washington, and in that moment, she was a stranger in a world that wanted nothing to do with her. She stood with her chin lifted, eyes wide and fixed on the Steinway grand piano that gleamed beneath the crystal chandelier. The polished black surface reflected the gold light of the room, and Amelia's heart ached as if the instrument was calling her name. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Who let that child in here? Security. Where is security? She must be lost. A woman in a glittering gown wrinkled her nose as though Amelia carried a foul smell. A man in a tuxedo let out a dry laugh and shook his head. But Amelia did not move. She did not look away. Her voice, though quiet, rose again with a tremor of determination. I just want to play. One song. For a plate of food. The irony was cruel. The hotel was hosting a gala to raise funds for underprivileged youth. Yet here was a real child in need, and the sight of her caused only discomfort and disdain. From the far side of the hall, Victoria Sterling began to approach. At 45, Victoria carried herself like royalty. Her pearls glimmered, her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, and her lips curved in a smile that was both elegant and merciless. The crowd parted for her. This was her event, her stage, her kingdom. She looked Amelia up and down with thinly veiled disgust. Darling, Victoria said, voice smooth as silk but edged with steel. This is no place for you. There's a McDonald's 2 blocks away. You'll find food there. The crowd chuckled. A few even clapped at her remark. But Amelia did not flinch. I only want to play, she said again. Her voice wavered at first but then grew stronger. Just one song. For food. The laughter grew louder. She thinks she can play? Sneered a man in a navy blue suit. She probably doesn't even know Middle C, scoffed another guest. Heads shook in pity. Some turned away, eager to return to their champagne and chatter. But one man in the back did not turn away. Dr. Robert Chun, a world-renowned pianist and respected judge at national competitions, watched Amelia closely. He noticed the way her gaze lingered on the piano, not with childish curiosity, but with reverence, with familiarity. There was something in her eyes he had only ever seen in true musicians. He stepped forward and whispered to Victoria, maybe we should let her try. This is an event for young talent, isn't it? Victoria's laugh was sharp, cold, and loud enough for all to hear. Robert, be serious. Look at her. Children like this don't learn Chopin or Beethoven. Impossible. But Dr. Chun said nothing more. His eyes, however, stayed locked on the girl. What no one knew, not Victoria, not the guests, not even Dr. Chun, was that Amelia carried a secret. For the first 8 years of her life, music was the air she breathed. Her grandmother, Betty Washington, had been her teacher. Betty was a gifted pianist who never received the recognition she deserved because of the color of her skin. But she had poured every ounce of her gift into her granddaughter. When Betty passed away, Amelia was thrown into the foster system. With it came shelters, hunger, and nights of loneliness. But through it all, she carried one thing with her: music. It lived in her memory, in her fingertips, in her soul. And now, as strangers mocked her, Amelia's small fingers twitched against the fabric of her backpack, playing an invisible melody only she could hear. It was a habit she used to survive the darkest nights. And tonight it was the very thing that would change everything. The room buzzed with whispers, laughter, and pity. But Amelia stood rooted to the spot, her chin lifted, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Victoria turned, sweeping the crowd with a smirk. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, raising her glass of champagne, It seems we have tonight's entertainment. A little street child who believes she can play. The room erupted with laughter. The kind that burns. The kind that makes you want to sink into the floor. But Amelia didn't shrink. She clutched her backpack tighter, whispering to herself the words her grandmother had said countless times. Play with your heart, Amelia, not your fear. Victoria's smirk widened. She leaned down, close enough for Amelia to smell the expensive perfume on her neck. Tell you what, little one, Victoria said, her voice smooth but venomous. You can touch that piano, if you agree to this deal. The guests leaned closer, eager for the spectacle. If you fail, Victoria continued, you will get nothing. No food, no sympathy. You'll be escorted out into the night. But if by some miracle you can play, she chuckled, then I'll give you all the food you want. And maybe, she waved her hand as though tossing a crumb to a bird, a few dollars. Amelia's stomach twisted. She hadn't eaten a real meal in days. The hunger gnawed at her, but deeper than that hunger was something else. A fire. She nodded. I accept. Gasps spread through the ballroom. She's crazy. Poor child. This will be embarrassing. Victoria clapped her hands once. Wonderful. Then let's give our guest the stage. The path to the piano opened. Amelia's sneakers squeaked softly on the marble as she walked forward. Each step felt heavy, as though the entire weight of the world pressed on her small shoulders. The grand Steinway loomed before her like a black ocean. Its polished surface reflected the chandeliers above. Its ivory keys gleamed like teeth. For a moment, fear gripped her. The laughter behind her stung like needles in her back. She thought of running. She thought of turning around and disappearing into the night. But then she remembered the sound of her grandmother's voice on warm Sunday afternoons. Amelia, music is not about notes. It is about telling your truth. When you sit before a piano, the world must listen to your heart. Amelia slid onto the bench. Her legs dangled, not even reaching the floor. She set her backpack down gently at her side, as though placing an old friend to rest. Her fingers hovered above the keys. They trembled not from fear, but from anticipation. Behind her, Victoria whispered loudly to a guest. This will be over in 10 seconds. She'll mash the keys like a cat and cry for her supper. The crowd chuckled again. But Amelia closed her eyes. She blocked out the laughter, the lights, the glittering gowns and tuxedos. She saw instead her grandmother's face, her warm smile, her wrinkled hands guiding her tiny fingers across a keyboard. And then Amelia began to play. First, the sound was soft. A single note, then another. The melody rose like a fragile bird stretching its wings. But within seconds, the room went silent. The laughter died. The whispers stopped. The clinking of glasses ceased. Because the sound that came from Amelia's hands was not random. It was not clumsy. It was music. Real, beautiful, soul-stirring music. Her fingers danced across the keys with speed and grace, weaving a melody that filled the grand hall like light flooding a dark cave. It was Chopin Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece her grandmother had taught her before she could even read words on a page. The guests stared in disbelief. Their eyes widened. Their jaws fell open. And in the back, Dr. Robert Chun's lips parted in awe. He leaned forward, whispering to himself, impossible, but perfect. Amelia played as though her life depended on it. Every note carried her hunger, her loneliness, her pain, and her hope. Her fingers moved with a fluency that no teacher could fake, no child could stumble upon by accident. This was mastery born of years of practice and a heart that refused to give up. When she reached the final note, it hung in the air like a prayer. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Silence. Then, the ballroom erupted. Not in laughter this time, but in applause. People leapt to their feet. Some wiped tears from their eyes. A few shouted, "Encore!" The sound rolled through the hall like thunder, but louder than all of it was the pounding of Victoria's heart. Her smug smile had vanished. Her face was pale, and in her eyes burned something far darker than surprise. It was fear. The thunder of applause shook the room. But Amelia did not bow. She only sat still, her small hands resting on the ivory keys, her chest rising and falling with quick, shaky breaths. She had played with everything she had. And in that moment, for the first time in days, she did not feel hungry. She felt alive. The crowd surged forward. Guests abandoned their champagne and caviar to get closer. A woman in pearls pressed a silk handkerchief to her eyes. A man muttered, "I haven't heard Chopin played like that in years." But not everyone clapped. Victoria Sterling stood frozen, her face tight and pale. The applause cut her like knives. She had orchestrated this gala to be the center of attention, to bask in admiration. And now all eyes were on a child in worn sneakers. Dr. Robert Chun stepped forward. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice loud enough for the room to hear. "This young lady is no amateur. This is talent of the highest order." A ripple of agreement passed through the crowd. Amelia finally turned her head. Her wide eyes searched the room, not for praise, but for food. She whispered softly, "Please, can I eat now?" Her words silenced the applause in an instant. The reminder of why she was there hit like a cold wave. A man in a tuxedo quickly called for the servers. Platters of roast chicken, bread rolls, and fruit were rushed toward her. Amelia's eyes widened, but before she could reach for anything, Victoria's sharp voice sliced through the air. "Stop!" The servers froze. The crowd turned. Victoria's heels clicked against the marble as she marched forward. Her smile had returned, but it was stiff, brittle, like glass about to crack. "Let's not be hasty," she said smoothly. "One performance does not prove anything. For all we know, she memorized one piece and stumbled here by luck." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dr. Chun narrowed his eyes. "Victoria, that child played Chopin with the precision of a master. Do not insult what you just heard." But Victoria lifted her hand. "If she truly has talent, then let her prove it. One piece is chance. A second piece, chosen by us, will reveal the truth." Her words hung in the air. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some guests nodded, curious. Others frowned, sensing Victoria's cruelty. Amelia's throat went dry. She had not prepared for this. She had only ever played what her grandmother had taught her. What if they chose something she didn't know? What if she failed? Victoria's smile sharpened. "Well, little one, do you accept? Or will you admit you are nothing but a fraud?" The room held its breath. Amelia closed her eyes. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Music is not about fear. It is about truth." She swallowed hard and whispered, "I accept." A murmur spread through the crowd. Victoria turned with triumph flashing in her eyes. "Very well, Dr. Chun. Since you seem so enchanted, why don't you name the piece?" Dr. Chun hesitated. His gaze softened as he looked at Amelia's trembling frame. He knew what Victoria was doing, setting the girl up to fail. But he also saw something unshakable in Amelia. A spark. Finally, he spoke. "Beethoven. Für Elise." The crowd murmured. It was a familiar piece, loved but deceptively difficult. Victoria's smile widened. She was certain Amelia would stumble. Amelia turned back to the piano. Her fingers hovered above the keys. She had heard Für Elise before, on the radio in passing in her grandmother's humming. But she had never been formally taught it. Her heart raced. Her palms sweated. Failure loomed like a shadow. But then she breathed in. She remembered her grandmother's words. "Music lives in you, Amelia. You don't just learn it. You feel it." And she began to play. The first notes were hesitant, soft, uncertain. A ripple of doubt moved through the crowd. Victoria smirked. But then Amelia closed her eyes. She let go of the fear. She let the melody guide her. Slowly, surely, the music took shape. The notes flowed like water, imperfect but alive, trembling but true. The crowd leaned forward, stunned once again. This was not flawless technique. This was something rarer. It was heart. And by the time she reached the end, the ballroom was silent. Not with ridicule, but with reverence. Victoria's smirk had vanished. Her hand gripped her champagne glass so tightly it threatened to shatter. Amelia opened her eyes, tears glistening. She whispered again, "Please, may I eat now?" And this time no one stopped the servers. The plates were set before her, and Amelia, with trembling hands, began to eat as the crowd watched in silence. Every bite was a victory. Every mouthful was proof. But in the shadows of the ballroom, Victoria Sterling's eyes burned. And in her silence, one thing became clear: this was not over. Amelia ate quickly, every bite trembling in her hands. For the first time in days, her stomach no longer ached with emptiness. But the ballroom was not at peace. Whispers rippled like wind through tall grass. Guests exchanged glances. Some were in awe. Some were ashamed. Others were quietly furious at Victoria for her cruelty. At the center of it all, Victoria Sterling stood stiff, her perfect smile cracking like porcelain. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was sharp, cold, desperate. "Enough of this charity act. She has eaten. She has played. Now let her leave. This gala is not a circus for strays." Gasps echoed across the hall. A man in the front row stood, his jaw tight. "You humiliated that child, Victoria, and she showed us more grace, more talent, and more courage than you ever have." Others murmured in agreement. Dr. Robert Chun stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "Victoria, you tried to break her, but instead, she revealed the truth. This girl is not a stray. She is a musician, a prodigy." Amelia froze, her fork hovering in midair. Prodigy? The word wrapped around her like a warm coat. She remembered her grandmother's voice again, soft and proud. "You have a gift, Amelia. One day the world will see it." Victoria's face flushed red. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Dr. Chun continued, "I will not allow her to return to the streets. Amelia, if you wish, I will take you as my student. I will give you food, shelter, and the chance to become the pianist you are meant to be." The room erupted. Some clapped, others gasped, but all eyes turned to Amelia. Her small hands shook. Tears welled in her eyes. For a moment, she could not breathe. She had lived in shadows, invisible, unwanted. And now, in one night, her entire life was changing. She whispered, "Yes, please, yes." The crowd applauded again, softer this time, filled with warmth instead of shock. But Victoria Sterling was not finished. Her voice cut through the applause like a knife. "This is madness. You're all blind. She's just a child from the streets. She does not belong among us." The room stilled, and for the first time that night, Amelia rose from the bench. She turned to face Victoria, her chin high, her eyes shining not with tears but with fire. "You're wrong," Amelia said. Her voice was small, but it carried. "I do belong, not because of clothes, not because of money, but because of music. My grandmother taught me that music belongs to everyone. It isn't locked in hotels or in rich houses. It's here." She pressed a hand to her chest. "And no one can take it away." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with truth. Victoria's face twisted, but she could not speak. The power had slipped from her grasp. No smirk, no sharp word, no cruel laugh could take back what had just been spoken. The guests began to turn from her. One by one, they looked away, their admiration now fixed on the little girl in worn sneakers who had reminded them of what music truly was. Dr. Chun placed a gentle hand on Amelia's shoulder. "Come," he said softly. "Your life begins now." Amelia bent down, picked up her faded backpack, and hugged it close. Inside was all she owned, but in her heart, she carried something far greater. Her grandmother's gift, her own courage, and the promise of a new beginning. As she left the ballroom, the grand chandelier shimmered above, its light reflecting in her eyes like a crown. And though she was just 12 years old, a girl who had once asked only for food, Amelia Washington walked out not as a beggar, but as a musician whose truth had silenced an empire of lies.